Part 2. The Grayling Fae, Chapter 16. The Seelie Court. Maisie. I was an inadequate horseman at best, but by the time Calibre began descending toward a distant palace set in the middle of a sprawling Fae city, I'd grown to trust her. She was a gentle animal, patient with the inexperienced in both horses and flying. She'd clearly been picked for this mission with care. I wondered who I had to thank, and whether there was actual kindness behind the choice, or if it was simply a practical matter of convenience. The first beams of sunrise were sliding over the eastern horizon, as we descended into the generous, waking courtyard of a white palace so opulent it nearly defied description. I had been impressed and wide-eyed at Lord Fanger's castle with its gray stone and weathered exterior, but now I was speechless. The perfect white stone of the palace glistened as if embedded with diamonds. It must have been marble, but there were no veins of impurities running through it. To be honest, I'd never seen marble, only heard tales of its use in royal circle. The palace was clearly not created by human hands. It seemed to radiate light. The best I could describe it was like light shining off the facets of a diamond. There was sparkle and there was light, but there was substance too. And clear architecture. But it was nothing like I'd seen in the Outlands. Everything here was light and sparkle. Even the air vibrated with magic and charms. Out of the corner of my eye, I thought I actually caught the sparkle of a wisp of magic. But when I looked full on, it was gone. Even so, magic was thick and pervasive here. As soon as Calibre put hoof to ground, a stableman appeared. He stood in front of her and patted her head, commending her for a job well done. There were no reins to take, but the horse settled into him. A page in glowing livery appeared and put a footstool on the ground for me to use to dismount. Before I could slide a leg over, one of the Fae who'd ridden with me grabbed me by the waist and gently deposited me on my weary feet. He snapped his fingers and motioned for a servant. "Take the selectress to her room. See that she has everything she needs. And let the king know we've arrived." "Certainly, my lord." The servant paused and gave me a sideward glance. "Prisoner or guest?" The other Fae I'd come with laughed. "You have to admit, Bridger, that it isn't exactly clear. Veiled and in peasant clothes, she looks more beggar than guest. You should learn to be more specific with your instructions." Bridger sighed. "This is the human selectress of King Kyelan IV. She's our king's guest. For the time being." I didn't like the ominous tone of that last addition. For the time being. The servant Fae motioned for me to follow. As I trooped off after him, I gave a last look over my shoulder to my two rescuers. They were now in high spirits, laughing and joking. Their wings folded in so that they looked almost human. Bridger slapped the other on the shoulder and congratulated him. "A job well done, Gage." "Agreed, a job done," Gage replied. "Now for the fallout." We moved out of range of hearing. I wondered about their sudden jovial attitude. They'd been stone silent on the journey. I'd been too tired and shocked to care or think what it meant. For all I knew, they always rode in silence, especially in the middle of the night. I'd assumed, perhaps wrongly, that once we'd entered Seelie territory, there'd be no threat. But now I thought, maybe not. They'd certainly relaxed now. The servant led me through a lower, ground-level side door to the palace, not up the glittering main front staircase and through the main entrance. We entered a mudroom clearly meant for servants, or maybe the king if he'd come in from a hunting trip. It was white too, but here the white stone had more dark veins and faults. The room was warm and serviceable, even homey, but it was clearly the bones and guts of the building. He took me through another door that led to the servants' hallway. I might have been a guest, but it was obvious I wasn't an honored guest. I felt half prisoner at least. Though my escort appeared unarmed, and I was unshackled, I felt the pull of restraints as he led me along. We mounted a set of stairs and began to climb. And climb. And climb. At last, we came out of the stairway and into a long white hall. We went no more than 2 doors down before he unlocked the door and pushed it open, standing aside for me to pass. I stepped inside, marveling at the white walls, the white stone floors covered with plush jewel-colored carpets, and the high ceiling. A fire burned in a golden grate inside a small white fireplace. 2 comfortable chairs stood before it. A tall, fluffy bed stood against one wall, so high it required a footstool positioned for mere mortals like me to climb up onto it. A sparkling pitcher of water that whispered that it was crystal clear, cold, and delicious sat on a night table next to the bed, along with a crystal goblet that glittered in the firelight. An ornate, gilded wardrobe that somehow managed to look full of self-importance was tucked against another wall. A floor-to-ceiling mirror hung next to it. A set of double-pane doors and an arched diamond-paned window flanked the fireplace. I assumed the doors opened onto a small terrace of some sort. I was too tired to investigate or look too hard. There was a final door that I assumed opened into a dressing or storage room. The room looked comfortable enough, especially to me, a poor country girl from a land of misfits. I wasn't used to such small luxury as this, but even to my naive eye it wasn't meant for royalty or dignitaries. Not in a palace as lavish as this. Maybe I should have been indignant. I was almost a human queen, after all. But I lacked the pretension, and was too tired to protest anyway. If you need anything, ring. The Fae pointed to a crystal bell on the table. Strangely, it didn't appear to have a clapper. The cut crystal of the bell caught the light coming in the window, separating the light into a rainbow on the wall like a prism. But without a clapper, it was useless to me. Before I could reply, he disappeared, as the Fae had a habit of doing. The door swished shut behind him. I heard the clank of a lock tumbling shut. I'd been locked in from the outside, but I wasn't surprised. The king didn't trust me. And why should he? I didn't want to be here. I should have known better, but I'd been desperate and not thinking strategically when I'd called out in the Douve. The Fae were notorious for playing pranks and tricks, and playing loose and fast with the truth and the rules. Life with Ree had taught me that. I'd asked to be taken safely out of the Douve. That request had been granted. If I'd been thinking properly, I would have specified where I wished to be taken. Too late for that now. But the Fairy King still owed me beauty. Though I didn't really want that, either. Not unless I could use it to save Catri's life. I'd only wanted it when I thought I was going to be thrust before King Kylan, forced on him as his selectress. An ornate, full-length gilt mirror was mounted on the wall perpendicular to the bed. I staggered over to it and studied my reflection. With the crocheted veil over my face and my simple homespun clothes, I grudgingly admitted that I looked like a beggar. At best, like the poor country girl I was. The morning light streamed into the small window across from the mirror, filling the room with brilliant light. The light should have been harsh and unflattering, washing my reflection out in the mirror and making my skin look pale and pasty. But the colors of my clothes and my reflection in the mirror were lit with a flattering light. Somehow, they managed to look brighter and more colorful than ever before. It was like the warm light of golden hour when the shadows were long, and the colors especially vibrant. The moments, always only moments a day, just as the sun was about to sink over the horizon at the end of day, when the light was most flattering. The time of day that the painter with their easel waits for, trying to capture the moment. I pulled my veil off and tossed it aside. My skin tones glowed warm and rosy. There were no dark circles beneath my eyes. Instead, they were bright and snapping, not dull and tired like they felt. My lips were luscious pink, and my cheeks shaded with flattering color. Even the color of my eyes was a brilliant, flattering shade I'd never noticed before. I was still me, but better. Even my 2 plain average features looked almost pretty. I'd heard of mirrors whose optics could be altered, but never anything like this. They could distort the image, but not change the color and essence of what's reflected. They might make the observer look thin to the point of comical, but nothing like this. "Mirror, you're flattering me," I said aloud almost as a joke. "It's very kind of you. Now show me as I really am." This was more folly on my part. I didn't expect it to obey. But immediately, the light in the mirror shifted, reflecting the strong light coming in. My skin became pale and washed out. The stains on my dress became obvious, as well as the ragged condition of my garments. I looked tired to the point of exhaustion. There were bags and circles beneath my eyes. "You are a magic mirror," I whispered. "One who flatters by nature. Wish I could take you home with me." I pulled my gloves off and held my left hand before me, curious what my beautiful hand would look like now as it was reflected in the truthful version of the mirror. Waving back at me in the mirror, my hand was as beautiful as ever, the nails of my fingers pink and rosy and perfectly shaped, not chipped like the other hands. The cuticles were perfectly pushed down to reveal half moons, no hangnails, no scars. The skin was perfect, soft and smooth. Not one finger crooked or turned in. I frowned. So the rose made my hand truly beautiful. It's not just an illusion. Not the glamour the Fae are famous for. I wasn't sure what that implied, but I was too tired to think on it more. I staggered to the bed, climbed up and fell into it, not bothering to get beneath the covers. Before I could put a pillow over my eyes to block the bright light, the light in the room dimmed, becoming not exactly dark, but pleasant to sleep in, like napping in the twilight of a late winter afternoon. "You are the Lord of Light," I thought. "Why should it be a surprise that light bends to your will in your palace?" My eyes fell shut and I was out like a light. When I awoke, the room was still washed in gentle light, but it was clear that the day had progressed. I rubbed my eyes and sat up, wondering how much time had passed as I stretched. I was parched with thirst. My stomach rumbled. As I reached for the pitcher of water on the table beside the bed, a bowl of piping hot porridge appeared, along with a tiny pitcher of honey and a bowl of fresh berries. Fresh berries? This time of year? I downed a glass of water, which was cool despite the warm temperature of the room, and tasted of fresh streams and mountain air. As I reached for the porridge and doused it with honey, I wondered who was watching me and how. How did they know I was awake and hungry? I hadn't rung the clapper-less bell. Hadn't so much as reached for it. Still, I was glad for the porridge. I downed it greedily. I hadn't had honey this fresh and sweet for ages, or porridge so perfectly cooked and creamy. Our meager fare at home was nothing compared to this. My bowl refilled as soon as one finished it. I hated to admit how greedy I was, but I downed it too, and set it aside before it refilled again. I slid off the bed and looked around for a pitcher and basin to wash up in. As if reading my mind, the closet door stood ajar. Light streamed from it. Of course, I investigated. What further magic was this? The door didn't lead to a closet at all, but to a small room adjacent to the bedroom. In it was a basin with a tap above it, and a tub that also had a tap. But no pitcher anywhere. It also had a standing toilet like in an outhouse, but much fancier. On a lark, I turned the tap. Water came pouring out into the basin, draining away miraculously. I washed my face and tried the tap on the tub. When I turned it, bath temperature water came out. Running water. Hot running water. Now that was truly magical. I used the toilet, stoppered the tub, and took a soak in the tub, using the fresh, soft soap provided. My aching muscles relaxed in the luxury. The soap lathered and filled the tub with bubbles. When I was finished, I dried with the soft, thick towel that had been laid out. Maybe I am an honored guest, after all. I should have been more afraid, perhaps. But I was too shocked by the events of the last 24 hours, and too stunned by the world of the Seelie Fae. If I were going to die today, I was going to die clean. However, when I went to get dressed, I was faced with the dilemma of putting my dirty, sweat-soaked clothes back on. When I held up my dress, I swore I could smell the stench of fear on it. Unwilling to face the memories that smell of fear brought up of my night in the Douve, I wrapped myself in the towel and went back to the bedroom to sit before the fire and dry my hair. Miraculously, the fire just kept gently crackling, as if it never needed stoking at all. I was sitting by the fire when there was a tap on the door. Before I could answer, a tall female fae who looked about my age shimmered in. She was simply stunning, the most stylish and beautiful woman I'd ever seen. Her diaphanous gown twinkled where the light caught it, as if trailing magic. Her skirts curled and danced around her figure, flattering her shape and moving as if they had wings of their own. She was surrounded by a cloud of pixies flitting around her, casting their light where they would. To one side of her, a brownie carried an ornate sewing box and pulled a small cart filled with bolts of luxurious material. On her other side, another brownie carried a pair of gleaming sewing scissors. My eyebrows rose. It took an instant to find my voice. "You must be my fairy godmother." I'd heard the fairy tales, but I was being cynical. Still, who could she possibly be? Those scissors looked lethal enough, but she hardly looked like an assassin. When she laughed, it was a gentle tinkling that filled the room with joy and light. I would have sworn even the flames of the fire shone brighter at her entrance. "Gage said you were a feisty one." Gage? She was on a first-name basis with the warrior fae. "I'm Lynette, and I'm no one's fairy godmother, I can assure you. I'm a simple dressmaker. Think of me as your stylist. I'm here to make you fit to see the king. His Royal Highness is particular about the people he sees. They must be fit to be in his presence." She laughed that tinkling laugh again. She pointed to the brownies on either side of her. "Nisa and Nola, my assistants." She made a general sweep of the air around her, indicating the pixies. I'd introduce the pixies, but they're much too fast and restless to hold still for introductions. Point to one and she'll answer if she's in the mood. Lynette cocked her head and studied me. "Where to begin? Who are you? What flatters you? And who do you want to project?" She laid a finger across her lips. Her eyes narrowed. She motioned me to stand. I reluctantly complied, clutching my towel close to me. I fidgeted under her intense gaze. I had no answers for her. One of the pixies whispered something in her ear. She nodded. Yes, I see it too. Troubling. Very troubling. If we can see it, anyone can. The signs were all there. But still, Raiden won't be pleased. We must make her acceptable despite it. The pixie whispered something else. Begin at the beginning, Lynette replied. Sage advice. But the dress commands the undergarments. We can't get ahead of ourselves now, can we? Nisa, or maybe it was Nola, the one carrying the sewing box, cupped her hand around her mouth and whispered up at Lynette. Lynette nodded. Not enough light. I agree. Not nearly enough light. But we must work with what we have. She motioned me to twirl around. We'll have to bend what we can. I wondered why she didn't simply command the light to give her more, or why it didn't immediately respond to her. I supposed I could have rushed her and tried to escape. But despite portraying herself as a simple seamstress, she radiated magic and power. Her wings weren't out, but I was sure she had them neatly folded out of sight. How does one outrun a being who can fly? And where would I go? I was defenseless against the Fae and their magic. Better to try to persuade the king to let me go back. To Katri. Or send me there himself. I twirled slowly, thinking. I couldn't make a mistake this time in asking for what I needed. As beautiful as Lynette was, she was Fae and bound to trick and twist my request into something else entirely. Something that made me the butt of a joke, or worse, got me deeper into trouble. I completed my rotation and faced her. I knew what I needed most. Persuasion. I need powers of persuasion that rival a king's ability to deny requests. I was quaking inside, trying not to let my fear show. Hoping I'd been specific enough. Lynette nodded. Yes, I can see that. Persuasion is a worthy pursuit and a valid request. But I wish I had more light to work with. Why does the king owe me a life? I asked. Lynette's innocent eyes went wide, but only for an instant. You don't know. I shook my head. She looked as if she was debating what she should say. Finally she shrugged. Whatever Raiden owes you is his business, and his alone. You'll have to ask him the particulars. I balled and unballed my fist, trying to control my shaking hands. Lynette's eyes narrowed. Your hands. She motioned impatiently for me to show them to her. She grabbed my left hand and stared at it. What's this? Her brows knit. I've never seen anything like this before. All the magic around her, and she'd never seen a beautiful hand before. It was the rose. In the douve, I explained, running on at the mouth when silence would have been more prudent. When Lynette looked up, her eyes were wide. Maybe you have enough light in you, after all. The rose only helps those who have some ability to penetrate the darkness. If they don't, it corrupts them. She wasn't making any sense. Morel had told me that the rose would make anyone beautiful. That's why it was so prized. Shall we begin? Lynette motioned to the pixies. A piece of vellum appeared in the air, held by a pair of pixies, along with a quill and ink. They held the parchment between Lynette and me. She glanced between her vellum and me, and sketched with a quill that moved on its own while she assessed me and talked with the pixies and her assistants. Larger sleeves? One of the pixies nodded. Yes, I think so. I do believe you're right. Lynette continued sketching. She has nicely shaped long legs. We must feature them, I think. I squirmed. How would she do that beneath a floor-length skirt? Hold still, please. Lynette's quill flew over the paper. It's a pity purple is a royal color. She stepped back to look at the work in progress and glanced over the paper at me. Violet, which suits your skin tones perfectly, is such a short wavelength of light. Yes, violet would suit you very well. Ultraviolet is so short that the human eye can't even see it. Kind of like the light in you. She laughed. It would do very well for you. Do be sure to wear purple when you're queen. But not before. Impersonating royalty is a capital offense. I'm not going to be queen. I lifted my chin. I'm not beautiful enough for King Kylan. I wouldn't be so sure about that. Lynette kept drawing and consulting with her pixies and brownies. You'll be beautiful if Raiden decides you should be. One of the pixies whispered in her ear. Yes, I know. Black light is just a shade of white. That's why I can use it so liberally here. What else do I have to work with? I frowned. What was this nonsense about black and white and shades of each? She saw my expression and laughed. Black is just a weak shade of white. A brighter light makes any shade of white look black. I didn't believe her. You mean the darklings are white, just like you? She stopped short. It's best not to make accusations about things you don't know or understand. And apparently, there's much you don't know. She paused, looking as if she was searching for the right words with extreme care. Darklings are nearly devoid of light. Though some would say to give them credit for even a single lumen is heresy. We all agree that they're empty enough, at least, that any brighter shade of light only makes them look darker. Don't jest about the darklings. Very dim light can be extremely dangerous. This entire conversation seemed ridiculous. I was getting lost with all this talk of colors of light and shades of black and white. I can't believe I'm even here. Half the human realm doesn't even have enough faith that you exist to be able to see their own brownies and house fae. Half the human realm only believes in the material, in what they call science, the things they can see and touch and measure. They separate science from the immaterial, the magic and the light. Is love not real? Can you not feel it? Yet it exists, though not all believe in it either. Their loss. Her quill continued to fly over the parchment. Finally, she nodded at the brownie holding the scissors. They lifted into the air, apparently of their own accord, and were met there by bolts of cloth that floated up from the cart. The scissors cut and sliced. Needles and thread flew from the sewing box. A dress materialized in the air before my eyes. As it came together, the fabric changed color and texture. Lynette pulled a wand from her pocket and pointed it at me. My towel became undergarments of fine, soft fabric. Just as the scissors snipped the last loose thread free, the dress wove itself around me. It was a stunning concoction, soft opalescent pink, tinged white and laced with veins of shimmering navy and black. It rippled and flowed around me as if stirred by a gentle breeze, caressing my legs, molding to them at times. But the air in the room was perfectly still. Only magic explained it. Lynette stood back and inspected her handiwork. Excellent work with the legs, Trixie and Nixie. She pointed at my feet. Fixie is our master cobbler. She'll make you a pair of slippers to die for. Stand still, please, while she works. Never disrupt an artist. One of the pixies darted around my ankles. She landed on my toe for an instant, light as a feather. Her tiny fluttering wings tickled. Don't move, Lynette warned. She's at a critical stage just now, making important measurements and calculations. I held my sides, trying to hold my laughter in. Do all of the pixies have names that rhyme with pixie? My eyes watered as I tried hard not to laugh. Lynette rolled her eyes. Of course not. That would be too confusing. Only the royal pixies are allowed the title. Fixie fluttered into the air in front of me, casting her orb of light on the wall. A pair of shimmering slippers appeared on my feet. I stared at them in wonder. They're beautiful. Yes, Lynette said. I didn't expect anything less. Now for accessories. She tapped her nose with her finger. A pixie whispered to her. Lynette focused her gaze on me. Nixie is right, as always. We must showcase your left hand. It's your best, most beautiful feature. We hope that when Raiden sees it, it will inspire him and show him your potential. Lynette pointed to my hands. A pair of shimmering elbow-length lace gloves appeared on them. The glove of the left hand ended at my wrist, more like a sleeve than a glove. At the wrist, where the fingers of the glove should start, a line of twinkling pink gems glittered. I think we'll go minimal with the jewelry, Lynette said. A delicate moonstone necklace appeared around my neck. A matching gold ring with a moonstone cabochon appeared on my naked baby finger. Moonstone is like you. Possibly light. Possibly of the night. Raiden will understand the point. She waved her wand again, and my hair twisted itself up into an intricate braided knot. One more wave of her wand, and a complete array of clothes appeared and filled the wardrobe. That should be enough clothes to last as long as you're with us. I have no idea how long that will be. But however long, you have everything you need for any occasion. If you need help dressing, just ask the wardrobe for assistance. She turned suddenly toward the door. Is everything here enchanted? Can every object do something magical? I asked impetuously. She turned over her shoulder. No, of course not. Magic always comes at a cost. We never waste it. It's too precious. Sometimes a chair is just a chair. She snapped her fingers at the pixies. Wait. You seem to have a deep understanding of the king. I need to find a cure for my sister's aging sickness and get back to her. She's in grave danger now that I'm gone. There are people who will want her dead. How should I approach the king with my request? What should I say? The levity left Lynette's face. You'll say what you'll say. Raiden has a way of dragging the truth out of people. No advice I could give will change that. As for your sister, don't worry about her. We're out of time here. Raiden will drop you back into time when it's appropriate. He may drop you back a day later than you left. Or centuries later, if he so chooses. Can he drop me back earlier than I left? I really hoped so. Then maybe I could prevent all of this from happening in the first place. Lynette shook her head. Afraid not. Time is passing in the mortal realm all the time. We can't turn it back, we can only time our re-entrance into it. In the meantime, no worries for you. You won't age while you're here, just like the rest of us." My face fell. "Oh. The only advice I can give is to be cautious who you trust around the court," Lynette said. "Not everyone's motives are pure. Humans are a rarity and a curiosity here. Not all of us are as open-minded about them as I am. Raiden isn't like Giselian, who steals handsome young men from your realm for her own pleasure. But he's made his share of mistakes with mortal women. There are some here who will feel threatened by your presence. Tread carefully." And then Lynette disappeared into thin air, leaving me standing with my doubts. Why did the Fae even have doors? And who was Giselian? Could she have meant the fairy queen of the Unseelie court? I'd never heard her name spoken before.